Dr. Carson referred to the reality of presidential politics. He said if he knows he's going to be attacked and his resume and history will be questioned, there's no doubt that's the case. But both these candidates have pretty inspiring aspects to their personal biographies. Dr. Carson announcing in Detroit, where he grew up under very humble circumstances with a single mother. Let's bring in our colleague Phil Mattingly, who's in Detroit covering the Carson event. Take a look at the stage and the crowd there. Phil, that is not the normal tone that you see in a presidential announcement. Much more conversational, much more like a talk and a sermon than a rousing speech. What was the crowd's reaction to it like in the room?
It was as if they were there to be entertained. It wasn't a big rally. It wasn't people. Everybody wasn't standing. The lights were dim. Everybody was seated. But I think, guys, what you saw, having watched and been to a number of Ben Carson's events where he's spoken, that's vintage Ben Carson. I actually walked, I was at the rehearsal last night for this event, and I walked about a block from the event where the location where it was held to the hotel where Ben Carson was staying. I walked the block with Ben Carson and asked him what he was thinking about saying today, if he had remarks down. I know he doesn't work with prepared remarks, and he said he had no idea. And so what you got today was a compilation of kind of everything that he puts out on the stump. And so it didn't come across as a big rah-rah pep rally speech, but it came across as what he's going to try and utilize over the next couple of weeks and months to reach voters. He feels like this works. This is what's gotten him his grassroots support so far, and he's going to continue tapping into this in the weeks ahead.
Phil, a lot of the people, one of the many unconventional aspects of this announcement was Dr. Carson introduced some of his senior campaign staffs at the end and brought them on stage. Are the people around him political pros who've worked on past presidential campaigns, or are they, like he is, new to this process?
For the most part, new to the process. His campaign manager, Barry Bennett, is a Rob Portman staffer, was actually planning to launch a super PAC supporting Rob Portman's Senate campaign this year before he flew down and met with Ben and Candy Carson about a month ago at their home in Florida and decided to jump on board with this. But his campaign chairman, Terry Giles, is a Texas lawyer. His top financial people, for the most part, are from the business sector. He does have a couple of former Newt Gingrich aides, Amy Pass specifically running his fundraising. But no, it's a mix that I would say leans more towards people that don't have a lot of political experience than people who do.
Phil, thanks for that. We want to go down to our Washington bureau and talk to Julie Bykowicz. Julie, you have many expertises, but one of them is the question of money in politics. I'm curious about both these candidates that we've seen announced this morning, Ben Carson and Carly Fiorina, and what their potential is as fundraisers and whether they'll be able to put the money together to be credible in this race.
Well, let's start with Ben Carson. I think that Dr. Carson has the ability to do tremendously well online. And there's a couple of pieces of evidence for that. One, there's a super PAC affiliated with him. It's actually been blessed by his campaign that's been around and has raised more than $13 million. Now, they've burned through all of that money, but now that he's actually in the race, we'll see if they can continue that sort of fundraising pace. And then his own exploratory committee was able to raise more than $2 million in just 2 months. So I think that shows a real enthusiasm for him sort of online in the masses with those low-dollar donors that other candidates can only hope to get.
And Julie, that $13 million was largely, just to be explicit about it, small donations. It wasn't million-dollar checks.
That's
it was
right.
Very small. It's a lot to amass in those small checks, people you can go back to again and again.
It really is. And then I'll be interested to see how Carly Fiorina does with donors. I was recently in Las Vegas for the Republican Jewish Coalition, and a lot of donors there were talking very highly of her, saying that they've been impressed by how she speaks, they're impressed with her early ideas, and they're really watching her carefully. Now, I think that a lot of them would like to see her as a vice presidential candidate, perhaps, rather than at the top of the ticket, but I'm going to be looking to see if people give her early money almost as a show of confidence, not necessarily saying, hey, we want her to win, but hey, we want her to be in the discussion for the long haul.
She raised about $22 or $23 million when she ran for Senate in California. About 5 or 6 of that came out of her own bank account. When she ran, she said her personal net worth back then in 2009 was somewhere between $30 million and $120 million. We don't know what her personal net worth is now, but presumably, unless she's been on a pretty crazy personal spending spree, she would have the capacity to self-fund some of this. Is that your anticipation and others in the Republican Party, that she will be writing checks to herself?
Well, we'll see. I think in these early days, she may get herself going in that way. But then it'll be up to other donors to sort of kick in. No one can really self-fund in this environment all the way, but I think that she could really get herself started in a nice way. We should know that in just a couple of months when we start seeing early fundraising reports.
And do either of them have a super PAC sugar daddy or sugar mama that we know of, someone who will write multiple million-dollar checks?
That's a great question. I don't think either one of them has that person at this point, at least not that I've seen. But in the next couple of days, now that they've been announced and are in the field, maybe we'll see someone like that come forward, because that certainly is something that we've seen with some of the previous candidates who have announced as well.